First question. Is this the same talk that I gave this morning, or a different one? We're sitting sesshin online today, and we had a good morning. Since lunch I've been feeling quite strange, a little nauseous, a little lightheaded, unsteady on my feet when I stand up. We had a lot of wind and a lot of rain this morning. It's sunny now. Not actually in the zendo today. I'm kind of camped in a corner of the sitting room. That's purely because I'm looking after a rather small but very needy dog today. Needed a cuddle just now. Generally looking after, seeing in and out. I've actually opened the windows to the garden, so there's a bit more background sound of the wind and the bird song, the occasional passing ambulance or police car, whatever. So is this part of my life? Is this me? Is all this part of this talk? What's part of what? What's the same? What's separate? There's a Koan which deals with this in the book of Equanimity, book of Serenity. It's the same book, different title. Same book, different title. This is case 17, Hogen's hair's breadth. Attention! Hogen asked Administrator Monk Shuzan, if there's even a hair's breadth of difference, heaven and earth are clearly separated. How do you understand this? Shuzan replied, if there's even a hair's breadth of difference, heaven and earth are clearly separated. Hogen said, if that's so, how could you understand it? How could you understand it? Shuzan answered, I am just this. How about you, Osho? Hogen remarked, if there's even a hair's breadth of difference, heaven and earth are clearly separated. At that, Shuzan bowed low. What's separate? What's not separate? And what's the role of language, Koan's practice, in relationship to all this? Shuzan is trying to respond in a way which isn't separate from the question. If there's even a hair's breadth of difference, heaven and earth are separated. Okay, what possible response can you make? Give you the same. Exactly back. No separation, no difference. I was talking about this with Barry and a bunch of us the other day. I said, it's pretty much perfect answer, this. Truly a not separate answer. But when he goes on, if that's so, how could you understand it? I am just this. How about you, Osh? Well, yeah, okay. Barry saw this as going slightly off the point. It's perfectly true. I am just this. But again, we've heard this stuff before. This is set in the 9th or 10th century. It's fresh. It's new, supposedly. Then it gets taken up and put in a book as a koan, repeated and repeated. Is it still not separate? What point does it become a Zen cliche? What's the real teaching going on here? As gets mentioned in some of the commentaries, there's a different spin on this. A different Shuzan turns up in case 43 of the Mumonkan or Wumenkan, the Gateless Gate, one of the other famous collections. So Shuzan holds up his staff and asks the same question. If you call this a staff, you're committed to the name. If you say it's not a staff, you negate the fact. What will you call it? How do you avoid falling into one side or the other? Since we try and speak, since we try and say something, since we try and show something, what would you do in that situation? I don't know. Maybe you grab the staff and belt him around the head with it. Hey, staff for you. You demonstrate the staff, you show the staff. But if you say, oh, it's not a staff, well, yeah, clever. It's not the word staff, obviously. If you say it is a staff, well, I'm simply showing you the, yeah, but it's not the word staff, is it? So words. This hair's breadth of difference between heaven and earth, this is words as well, actually, because it comes from, and Zen. Oh yes, we're beyond the words and sutras, yeah, but we refer endlessly back to texts and texts and texts to go beyond texts. So this is, well, it's often called faith in mind. This is translated as engraving trust in the heart. It's one of the classic Zen poems, one of the 3 or 4 truly classic Zen poems. I'll just read you a few verses. The utmost way is not difficult. Just be free of preferences. Without attachment or aversion, all becomes transparent. Missing the way by a hair's breadth, you separate earth from sky. If you want to see the way as it is, do not affirm it or deny it. Dividing things by opposites is a disease of the mind. By not seeing the subtle essence, you lose your serenity. The circle of the way is boundless space. There is nothing lacking, nothing extra. Grasping and discarding will not bring you there. Just be free of preferences. Avoid picking and choosing, as another translation of the same thing says. Without attachment or aversion, all becomes transparent. Without attachment or aversion. So we can think of picking and choosing in terms of, opposites. And opposites we know from language, we know from speech, we know black and white, we know good and bad, we know nice and nasty. We know man and woman. Such polar opposites pull apart. They dismantle reality. They're useful for a certain kind of pointing. But if we take them seriously, if we take these oppositions as real, really real, we find ourselves in all kinds of problems. When is this moment ever truly simply good or bad? Is anything ever simply black or white? And if we're thinking about people here, we know that the Americans have this wonderful one-drop rule. If you have one drop of nominally black blood in you, you're black. If not, you're probably white. Of course, things get more complex than that, but we need things to be clear. We need things to be definite. We need things not to be muddled, not to be the complex reality of the shades of grey that everything in life actually is, our whole experience of life. And we can get severely misled by this, because if we take these oppositions as absolutes, if we take them seriously, then we act as if they're real. And people act towards us as though they were real. So they have a kind of reality, but it's a second reality because really they're empty. They're arbitrary, they're conventional. And a nice image for that is money. Paper money is a good example of that. What's the real difference in value between a $100 bill and a £5 note? Or a dollar bill and a £50 note? Well, effectively nothing. They're little scraps of paper. And yet we treat them as if they were worth. And because we treat them as if they have value, they have value. But it's not an essential value, it's not a fundamental value. It's a value we choose to give them collectively in this relationship. And so many things we can take as being exclusive or inclusive. We can draw firm boundaries between things, or we can allow for the play, the interplay, the interconnection of everything in reality. And this means that we end up being a very, very different kind of self in these different ways. A self which is seeing myself as always separate, potentially from everything, separate from you because you're a different person, separate from the world because the world either conforms to my wishes or threatens me, even separate from myself because there are always things about myself I don't like or wouldn't like to be or would like to be but don't feel I'm so much to be separate from, a universe of separation. Where do we experience this, potentially, separation within our practice? Well, Joko tells us it's about our resistance. This is where we meet that potential sense of separation, the resistance to the pain in my knee, the resistance to that recurring thought in my mind, the resistance to this feeling that I just don't like feeling. Every time I'm tempted to turn away, to dissociate, to push out, to push back, to stand away from. My resistance to my life as it is, my picking and choosing. I want my life to be like that, not like that, thank you very much. So we can take that as an invitation to separation, which is how we conventionally do it, even without realizing. Of course we move away. Why would we cleave to what's painful? Why would we cleave to what we don't like? Why would we cleave to what's unpleasant? And yet, attachments. Don't pick and choose. Don't become attached. Well, that's conventional Buddhist wisdom, isn't it? Our attaching is the problem. It hooks into us. We're dragged down a certain path, whether we want to go or not. An attachment, positive, aversion, negative. This is all the time what we're coming up against in our resistance, isn't it? Actually, I want that, and I can't get that. I can't get that. That's resistance in my sitting too. So it's what I'm trying to do, just detach from that. Detach from my attachment, detach from my aversion. But hang on. That is to turn away. That's to allow my resistance to push me back. That's to actually separate out from my real life as it is, my real life as it actually is in this moment. Comfort, discomfort. So what does Joko actually recommend? We've talked about this a little before in terms of our zazen, in terms of our response to anger. Can I actually become my resistance, not push it away, but live, actually be this resistance that I experience in this moment? That's harder. Sometimes that's impossibly hard, but if I can, that's not separating, not pulling heaven and earth apart, not becoming separate from my life as it actually is. How do I do that? Well, again, Joko's absolutely clear. We stay with this body, this experience, these emotions as they are in this moment, these thoughts as they arise and fade in this moment. It's not quite true to say this, but it's a useful way of thinking about it nevertheless. It's not my resistance which is the problem. It's kind of my resistance to my resistance. Resistance, absolutely necessary. I can't walk without the resistance of the floor. I can't actually breathe without the resistance offered by my muscles, my bones, the air. Resistance is life. Resistance is vital. So why do I resist my resistance? If I can stay with this resistance, if I cannot hold it at a distance, but become it in this sense, become it in the sense of remaining embodied, not getting lost in that story, not always going off and making a cup of tea or whatever, then I experience this experiencing which Joko is always talking about. My life, non-separately. Perhaps I come to see that these feelings, these emotions, these thoughts, these attachments simply are me. Where else is my life? Basic Buddhism, this is what there is. There's no me hovering above somewhere else or behind or sometime or somewhere. I fit my life. I fit my life like a glove. I fit my life like a box in its lid, to borrow an image from another very Zen poem. What else could I be? There is no gap. There is no separation. Except the one that I imagine. So if I was walking with Hogen and he asks me, if there's even a hair's breadth of difference, heaven and earth are clearly separated. How do you understand this? I don't know whether it's a perfect answer. Don't know whether it counts, but say, Hogen, my brother, please show me this gap.